it just felt right. And all the things I heard felt right. I never heard subdivision. I never heard golf and tennis. I heard art. I heard 70% green space. I just heard a language that really appealed to me. And to be honest, I had no idea at that time how much I would fall in love with just the creative energy in the community.
Welcome back to Serenbe Stories. We're very excited to have Janice Barton with us today. Hey, Janice, how are you?
I'm great, Monica, and I'm excited to be here too. Thank you.
Looking forward to the conversation.
And Steve, as always, is with us. So, Janice, you are a longtime resident, an avid quilter, which is a fun thing I want to talk about, and you are the board chair for the Art Farm at Serenbe, which is our nonprofit that supports arts and sort of environmentally, cultural programming, all sorts of fun stuff we're going to talk about, with a mission to touch the deepest wells of the human spirit through art and nature. We're catching up with Janice, what brought her here, and how the environment of Serenbe shapes her creativity, and what exciting things we have in store for the Art Farm. So the first question we always ask everybody, Janice, is, what is your Serenbe story? How did you discover Serenbe, and how did you choose to move here?
Thank you. So I was living in Roswell, Georgia in 2005 and was looking for a place to take my grandchildren on a weekend where we could be out in nature. And one of my coworkers happened to mention this place south of the airport. And there was no place south of the airport that you at that time would be interested in or that you knew about. And she said, it's this great bed and breakfast. You know, you can do a hayride, they have a bonfire. The kids would love it. I brought them, we came down, we stayed in one of the little cottages. And at that time, it wasn't the inn. It was actually a bed and breakfast. And Marie cooked breakfast and Steve served breakfast. It's very different. And that first weekend, I wasn't even aware that there was a community being developed. I think it might have been the second or third time I came down. And I think they had then maybe converted that, what's the registration barn today, was more of a real estate office at that time.
That's right.
And I'd been looking and contemplating where I might want to retire. I was born in Florida, so I had this thought that I would retire and go back to Florida. And I had bought back in maybe 2000 a condo just north of Naples. But very quickly, I determined that was not where I wanted to be. And I don't know what it was. I just didn't feel like I'd found my people and that I would want to spend my retirement years in Florida. I hadn't sold it, but I was thinking, I'm not sure that's going to work out. So when I came the second or third time and saw the real estate office, I ended up buying my lot that day. I tend to be sometimes a little impulsive, but it just felt right. And all the things I heard felt right. I never heard subdivision. I never heard golf and tennis. I heard art. I heard 70% green space. I just heard a language that really appealed to me. And to be honest, I had no idea at that time how much I would fall in love with just the creative energy in the community. Steve's, I think, greatest accomplishment is the people that he's attracted to this community, because you can have a concept and a vision of what you want to build. But when you start talking community, the community creates the community. You can't do that on your own. You've got to have people that share your passion for what you're trying to build. So yeah, I bought the lot in 2005 and in 2008 became a resident.
Janice, I think you're a perfect example of when people respond to art, it touches their soul in a way that we have forgotten. And coming from Midtown in Atlanta, arts was always an important thing. And as we've traveled, we found that there was always someone who supported, whether it was the government, the church, or someone, art that really made a difference in a place. And that's why art was important from the day one. And you're a perfect example that just by putting the art foundation in, it attracts that creative class and it makes for a very different community.
I agree totally.
Yeah, I like what you're saying that you never heard subdivision or golf and tennis. And obviously, as we market it, we've never really used those words. But I like that that struck you. And it is the art. That's also, Steve, how you just said that we forget. And I think schools don't put the money into the arts. They don't sort of, maybe a little bit more with STEAM these days. But it is something that is so different and unique to have a community take dollars to support the arts. And so that really, the Art Farm, which is the nonprofit here, is really the foundational spirit of a lot of the programming that we do. But before we get into that, you've always been creative yourself. You had a marketing agency. And so I think you then, I don't know if you sold it or what you did in this time frame between 2008 and now, but I know that you have been traveling and you travel a lot for the arts. So tell me a little bit about where your passion for the arts came from and where you've been and what you'd like to see here. Because I know we've talked about how can we sort of incubate some of those same types of workshops that you're traveling for. So give us this whole story.
I certainly love to travel because I think that's such a wonderful way to learn more about the world and the people in it. To be honest, I never had a lot of time to explore my own artistic practice when I was working and being a mom, and you just weren't enough hours in the day to find very much time to pursue those efforts. But when I retired, I was never worried about what I was going to do when I retired. That was not anything that concerned me. So when I retired, then I really had time to pursue what I want to do with my time. And I'd never really drawn or painted or even quilted. But once I was set free, I hit the workshop road and I did everything. I would go explore painting and drawing and quilt making and pottery. It just everything, because using your hands to make something is so therapeutic, I think, for everybody. And the word artist can be so intimidating to some people, but it's really, and sometimes I even have difficulty calling myself an artist. I think of myself more as a maker. I just like to make things, sit down and create something. It doesn't matter what it is. It's the creative process. It's that energy that you put into trying to create something. And to be candid, that's the part I've most enjoyed about the connection here to visiting artists, has been trying to help other people understand how important our investment in the creative process is as opposed to what the product is. I mean, we all collect. That is so subjective. Everybody you ask has a different viewpoint on what they like and why they like it. And that's all wonderful. But honoring the process of creating is, to me, what the real core of art making. It's what is your practice and how do you go about that and pursue it?
Well, and you created a whole room dedicated to your quilting. So this, I mean, I totally understand maker feels more comfortable, but the work that you do is artistry. It is beautiful. So you went from trying all these different things, but how did you hone in on quilting? And then where are you in that process today? Is it a daily practice or something that you quilt for friends?
Well, I mean, I've always had a passion for, I'm a tactile person. So fabrics and anything I'm touching and feeling that way is very appealing to me. And the colors, and I think of it as a paint box. You can just do anything with fabric. And I began playing around with it. And the way I started was fairly structured, there are a million quilt patterns. And I was doing somewhat traditional quilting just to learn the techniques when I started. But now I really enjoy exploring more artistic quilts. And this is such an inspirational place for that. I mean, you can take one walk in the woods and come back with 10 different ideas to explore. And, you just start drawing them out and trying to imagine how to convert your idea into a quilt product, a sewn product. So, for example, I've been studying and looking at the map, the bird's eye view of Serenbe. And it's so interesting because it's not gridded. There's nothing gridded here. It's not geometry. Well, it is. It's sacred geometry, but it's not linear. So I've been playing around about how to interpret that and to have Cedar Creek and all the omegas and the shapes that are here. So yeah, there's just tons of ideas that you get walking around in the woods here.
Yeah, no, I think that the woods are inspirational. And I think that if nothing, anybody can take anything away from Serenbe Stories, I think it's that everybody honors the trails and just loves getting out. And just even if you're just walking from one side of Selborne to the other, that 5 minutes will give you just sort of, I mean, no pun intended, or I guess maybe intended, breath of fresh air to rethink anything, even between meetings. It sort of recharges you. Do you have any quilts that are your favorites that you've done?
Right now, I guess the one that gets the most attention is a quilt I started. I took a class, I think out on the West Coast, for wool applique. So it's a little different process than traditional quilting. And I started my project and it was so labor intensive. I've probably got 800 hours in this quilt now that it's finished, but I put it up. I thought, I'm getting so tired of working on this. So when COVID came to visit, not me personally, but when we were all struggling with what are we going to do, locked up in our homes, I pulled that project back out and I really became intentional about finishing it. And it is, for me, what I call my Serenbe story quilt. It's comprised of 30 8x8 squares. And each 8x8 square tells a story. It might be the fox I saw one morning in the backyard. It might be Huckleberry, my little dog friend next door. It's the story of the ducks at the pond down toward the end. You know how there was only one duck, and now we have a family of Peking ducks. It's a visual map of kind of my experiences over the last 10 years or so. I don't know what will happen to it. I mean, my family loves it, but for now, it's just a piece of art on the wall and something that reminds me of lots of happy memories.
No, I think we need to, the minimum, get it photographed professionally if you haven't, for the archives, if you will. The future museum, right, Steve? The History Museum of Chat Hills.
Actually, I love that idea. And we have so many good photographers here. A friend of mine has photographed it. And then a lot of friends have encouraged me to write the little story that goes along with it. What is that all about? So we'll see. There may be a little book that talks about it.
I could see a book, definitely. Maybe the art farm and Serenbe will come together with Janice and help you make that a reality.
Well, I don't know. That seems like a lot of self-promotion, but it's a sweet project and we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. I think that quilt, whether photographed or at some point in near or distant future, will be part of the Serenbe archives and maybe even the museum one day. I think in a very sweet and artistic and talented way, it tells the Serenbe story. The whole idea of the foundation of art, but really underlying that is nature. That's what drew us, and I think a lot of other people. And that is the true art palette, is you just go out into nature and you can't help but open your creative spirit. And I think the quilt and your life here has certainly demonstrated that, Janice.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think we are so lucky to have you that you did choose Serenbe instead of the condo in Naples, because think of the work that you've done, right? And so now switching gears into the art farm, you're the chair of that group. Tell me a little bit about the mission and what kinds of programming like you're sort of working on right now. I know over the years it will morph and change, but today, what do you see? What are the goals for the next couple of years?
I certainly think bringing art back to Serenbe after 2 years of COVID, when we were all locked up. So our mission this year has been, let's just start making things happen again, give people an opportunity to experience something in the woods, performance in the woods, poetry reading in the woods, violin concerto in the woods. That's kind of been where we are for this year. And we've done some really interesting things. This Broadway in the Woods series was very well received. We had people come in from 11 different states to see Jeremy Jordan, who was the first performer in that series. And we're bringing Megan Hilty next month as our second in that series. And the formation of the board was I think, somewhat unique in looking at having councils, a theater council, a music council, film council, dance council, having specific teams who focus on programming in a specific genre. What do we want to do in theater? What do we want to do in dance? And then they're generating the ideas. And those councils are made up of residents and non-residents. So there may be someone, for example, from Atlanta who's involved in theater that wants to help us think about theater. And we're very open to that. And it's helpful to have that various levels of expertise in a certain field. So our programming intent is to always be very diverse, to be diverse in content, to be diverse in price points. We're not programming just for Serenbe. If you live here, it's a wonderful benefit, but we're programming for the public and trying to be cognizant of being inclusive for the surrounding area in terms of where we're pricing and what we're producing.
You mentioned theater, music, dance, film. I think there's a public arts group. And there's an environmental group too, right?
Those 4 councils are primarily what I call the performance councils. And then there are 3 other councils in environment. And I'll talk about that in a minute because there's a lot of wonderful stuff happening there. Community engagement, which is how we're connecting both inside Serenbe, and then just as importantly is how are we connecting outside Serenbe? What are we doing to expose the community at large to what we're producing? And then public art and special projects. So there's a place for things that maybe don't fit anywhere else. And our public art, I can't tell you what they are, but there are a couple of projects that we're in the process of finalizing that are going to be absolutely groundbreaking next year. I mean, to have an artist of the caliber of certainly a global environmental artist come here to work on a specific project is really exciting.
Well, and there's a couple artists that I think you can speak of that will be installing some sculptures this fall. Isn't that correct?
Yes. Curtis Patterson has been working on a sculpture for probably about 8 months that will be installed in September, Serenity for Shango. And we're really excited about that piece of work. And Christina May, whose work was at the Atlanta Botanical Garden several months ago, her work is coming in October. And Christina's from San Francisco and just a delight. She's one of those people, when I was talking about how wonderful it is when you get to know the artist and talk to the artist and hear about their process. Once you meet Christina, you're just over the top in terms of really respecting how hard she works to bring her product to the public. So her work is sculptural and made from wire. She does all this intricate work with her hands. It's a brutal way to create, but just wonderful to look at. So we're really excited to have both of those pieces, which Christina's work is just here for a showing. It will be here temporarily, although it will be available to the public to buy. So we're certainly hoping that we'll see some of that work in the community after Christina leaves. But Curtis's work is here permanently. Art Farm is being gifted that sculpture and will have it and maintain it for the future. And it will be part of our public art tour when we're ready to get that scheduled and make it available for the public to see.
Yeah, and all of that will be coming. We'll put all in the show notes how to sign up for the Art Farms newsletter. But that's a great way to stay on top of things and hear what's coming beyond the sculptures to make sure when the next Broadway in the Woods comes out. You guys also did a fun evening at Hulsa, which was Movies That Matter, right? Can you say a little bit about that?
Movies That Made Me. So we're lucky here to have a lot of film industry people who live here or come through here. And now with so much film happening in Georgia, we have access to a lot of those professionals, be it stuntmen, actors, writers, filmmakers. So we used to do something similar. We'd just all get together and watch a movie, have film night. But it seemed an interesting twist to engage professional people in terms of what influenced them, what movie influenced their career path or their career choices, or what's their favorite movie. So we're kind of presenting it as it's a little bit lecture as well as viewing the movie. The first one was with Wes Chatham, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it was really, Wes knew so much about that movie that the rest of us didn't even know. I mean, it's like you get all the film notes that you just weren't aware of. And of course, now it's, how old is that? 40 years old, 30 years old?
Oh, God. Yeah, definitely.
It's older. And I mean, you could tell that when you watched it because it's not all the CGI you have today. But just hearing him talk about the movie was, I thought, very interesting and inspiring. So we're excited about that series.
I think you were out of town, Janice, but I know Steve was at the last music event, which one of the big thing or series, I should say, that has happened. A wonderful neighbor, Faith Scriven, really kind of runs or leads that committee, is something called Tertulia. So Steve, I don't know if you want to jump in and like tell us about that experience.
I think it's wonderful, and it wasn't my first time, but I sat next to someone who was there for the first time. And as the evening started, she said, well, what makes this so special? Why are you excited? What is it? And I said, well, I tried to explain to her, and I said, well, wait until you see how the evening unfolds. And so the first series of numbers, the first course was served. And during that first course, I turned to her and I said, well, what do you think now? And she said, oh my God, it's like having movie stars in your living room. And that was exactly it. Here you had these world-class musicians in front of you while you were having dinner. And of course, it's a great thing that they say, hey, they're bringing back this incredible music to the period that it was written. And it wasn't for a bunch of people sitting in stiff clothes in a row. It's to be in pubs and restaurants. And it brought that whole feel back. And I thought she really captured the essence of it. And it's just one of the most incredible things. And you look at their webpage and they are now in New York, San Francisco, and Serenbe on their circuit. How incredible is that?
Which is so fun. I know there's going to be a couple more this year, and we're going to interview Faith and James, who I think runs Tertulia. So that'll be in this season, which is exciting. Another thing that I'm really excited about, and although I think it's targeted maybe to more families and kids, is Terminus Modern Ballet and the Alliance Theater have teamed up. Can you talk about that partnership and how that came to be?
Yeah, they've partnered for Peter and the Wolf. And those performances are in September. And what makes things so magical is the fact that we're not a black box theater. Those moments, that touch the deepest wells. I mean, a lot of times touching the deepest wells happens in nature. So when you're combining art in a natural setting, I think it ramps up the magic factor, certainly for me. And also because they're intimate performances. You're not sitting with 700 other people experiencing something. You're sitting with, I don't know, I like at Tertulia, it's maybe 100 people. At Jeremy Jordan, it was 150 people. Where can you go to see that quality, that level of performance, and feel like it's being performed just for you? So Peter and the Wolf, you're sitting right there. You're right in front of the stage. You feel like you're part of what's happening. So that'll be a wonderful performance, I think, for both kids and adults. And it's over 2 weekends. So there's 4 opportunities to experience Peter and the Wolf.
And then another fun one, which I think just cropped up on the calendar, which I'm not sure if it's just in August, is Dad's Garage, just taking it on a whole nother level. For fear that anybody would think that it's all chamber music and theater, like this is a really fun thing as well. So did that come out of the theater group?
Yes. So that we're exploring ideas with a lot of different producing partners. So we're more of a presenting organization. We have access to lots of different programming, theater, music. It's just how big is our list and who do we want to call? And people fall in love with Serenbe when they come here. So even if you've never done an outdoor performance, when you come to this environment, and I think we give you the tour, we call it drinking the Kool-Aid, but that happens. I mean, people start to imagine their productions in a whole different way. So Dad's Garage, we're looking at doing in the pavilion so we can hear the frogs and the crickets, but we're undercover. And also we want to this is kind of a test run to see how does it work. That happens, I think, with a lot of the groups we're bringing down. First, they've got to believe that we'll provide the production support they need. And then they've got to believe that they can pull an audience here. They all want to perform here. It's just, can we make it work given what we do? And I think there's some other ideas we're exploring with Dad's Garage for a longer, perhaps more of like a little mini series. There's lots we can do with different performing groups, but we're really excited about the diversity of programming that something like improv brings to Serenbe.
Yeah, and that'll be a lot of fun. And we're also dipping our toes in the water, right? Art Farm is in, I think it's early December, with like a small comedy night. A little bit different than improv. My comedy friends are very clear that improv is different from comedy, stand up. So I want to make that point. That'll be another event at Halsa. Just a fun evening. And again, I think it's such a great opportunity that the Art Farm is willing to sort of just try things out. Like, let's throw stuff against the wall and see what sticks, what brings people in, and what people want more of.
Absolutely. Somewhat experimental at this point. But last year we did a night, we called it Voice Variety Show. And it was kind of like, and everybody's way too young, but there used to be something called Ed Sullivan Variety Show. And that was a big thing back in the 60s and 50s and 60s. So it was kind of modeled after that. Let's just get together and let's listen to a comedian, listen to a vocalist, listen to a spoken word artist. So it was a variety, it was only an hour, 15, 20 minutes each performer. And we had so much fun that night. And we were in the Oak Room, so there was only maybe 120 of us in there. But it felt intimate, and you had great performance. I mean, a comedian we're really looking forward to the comedy night where we're just focused on making people laugh. But that's the great thing about an organization built on our model. We don't have a production company where we have to do these things. We have a budget. And now what are we going to bring for that budget? And fortunately, we live where the community is investing in the Art Farm programming. So the transfer fees that we receive from each real estate transaction are our primary source of funding. So that's such a wonderful thing to have done when you're talking the vision of that in terms of building a community and having arts in the community. Yeah, that's a novel and wonderful idea.
Yeah. And I always wonder, and maybe Steve can answer this, have you found, Steve or Janice, in your travels, are there more communities doing that? I know Seaside down on 30A in Florida had that sort of a model, which I think is phenomenal. But God, what if more developers and communities utilize that concept to have an ongoing funding mechanism for the arts, for example? Steve, do you know?
So the listeners understand what this does. Last year, the transfer fee contributed $1 million to the arts. So this really gives the foundation for programming within the community, but it is for the greater community of Metro Atlanta or anyone that comes in. I am not aware of other communities that do this through a property transfer fee. Many people that visit think it's a great idea, but this is something you have to include in your CCRs from the time the first lot is sold, and something that would be very difficult to add once a community has already started.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any other than Seaside. I mean, you do find communities that will have perhaps an artist cottage. They'll have a residency cottage. I've seen that in a few locations, but not a robust budget for arts programming and environmental programming. I mean, our Environment Council has done such a phenomenal job at advancing like the helping work with the city for the Bee City designation. There is a wonderful opportunity federal grant program, and I think it's Fish and Wildlife America the Beautiful. They've allocated $60 million in support of environmental projects across the country. And the Environment Council is working with Southeastern Grasslands and several other organizations and the city they've written the grant proposal for us to get funding for the Wildflower Meadow in Serenbe, the Motto Wetlands, and the 4 parks in the city to do improvements there, and the compost station. I mean, that's going to be an impactful idea, both for Serenbe residents and non-residents. It will be open. We're working on the construction of the compost station now and hoping to launch for the public next year. We'll kind of run some trials to just see mainly how we can effectively communicate how to compost and get people signed up to compost. So I think these very specific environment programs are going to be an important part of what we're bringing to this area as we move forward.
I think all of that's super exciting. And the compost that you're mentioning is something that the Serenbe Farms, our farm, has been composting for ages, and the community as a whole has been composting. But as we've grown, so has the amount of compost or waste, if you will. And so it's really taking it to the next level to really create what we're calling sort of station number 1 for the city that would be a drop-off point at the farm. So that's going to be really exciting. And I know we're working with Rodale, who is located up the street on Manyfold Farm, Rodale Institute, to help us with the metrics and track it and make sure that we're doing it on a professional level.
There's so much science to composting. I've been learning myself recently what all of that means and how to really be intentional about it. So the educational component is certainly what the art farm will own. How do we engage people and help them understand what they need to do? So yeah, we're very excited about that.
And you mentioned cottages as we're wrapping up here, but I do want to ask about facilities. There are 2 cottages that were partnered with Rural Studio that are in place that artists come and stay at. Not a formal residency program at this point, but if you will, every artist who comes is in a sense in residency. And I know Serenbe with the show house, we're working with you guys with a decorative arts fellowship and have an artist coming to the cottages. I'm assuming or guessing that Christina May is perhaps staying in them. I think our comedians will get to use them in December. I don't know if the Tertulia, it's pretty cool who comes through there. But tell us a little bit about the initial vision or where you guys your head is. What's the 2 to 5 year plan for the art farm, the place, the land that is adjacent to Serenbe?
Yeah, good question. So right now, it's pretty much like you've indicated. We've got the 2 cottages, and the way we're using them now, as we're partnering with production companies and producers of content, we're using them so that those people can come and perhaps work on whatever the production is or stay here while they envision and imagine the place and what they're going to do here, using it for someone like Christina. So artists are in and out of there currently, but it's somewhat informally. But as we're working on this strategic plan, one of the pillars we're really researching and thinking about is this ongoing workshop model where we have a maker space that we can use as a teaching space or as a studio space for a visiting artist. How do we begin to combine the teaching aspect and the workshop aspect along with the other uses of those cottages? And currently, we don't have a maker space, but that is one of the things we're exploring in that strategic plan is what specifically do we want our facilities roadmap to look like? We currently have containers and some decking space. So in the immediate future, we want to build a performance area at the art farm itself so that there is some space over there where we could do we could probably seat 125 in that area, and we'd have some tiered seating. So there's grass seating, there's close to the stage seating. It's applicable to accomplishing several different things in the seating venues. So getting that space ready for performances and then thinking about the maker space and the workshop opportunities are probably going to be the next direction of the strategic planning visioning.
And do you guys envision building more cottages as well?
Absolutely, because I think when and if we're building a maker space, we would probably build more cottages with that first little. So that might be project one, is a maker space and 3 or 4 more cottages. And we see how that works and what that model really turns out. How do we make it successful and how do we need to tweak it? And then project two, there is room on some property in that area for an outdoor amphitheater. Do we want to actually build a larger performance venue out in the woods? I don't know if you've ever seen or been to I think it's Theatricum Botanicum in the Topanga Canyon right outside of LA. That's kind of a visual inspiration, I think, for some of what we could envision back there. So there's a lot of opportunity in terms of what we want to do. And to be honest, that map's not drawn yet. We get to draw it ourselves. So that's exciting.
That's amazing. And if people want to get involved, are there volunteer opportunities? Are you taking more people on the committees and advisory? If they want to give money, if they want to build a cottage, should they reach out to you, or are there all sorts of opportunities for them?
There are a lot of opportunities for all of those things. So I think the primary source of information and the avenue to reach the art farm and me or anyone else is to go to the website, which is artfarm@serenbe.org, and sign up for the newsletter. And if you have specific interest in, maybe you're a dancer or a musician and you're interested in learning how to participate and how you can be involved, then contact us through the website. We get that actually quite a lot. And that's how we built our advisory councils, was through people that were interested, people we knew, people that knew us. And that's important because those councils that's what's driving who comes here to perform.
Fantastic.
But we also need people to park cars, check people into an event. So the folks who live in this area have been very supportive. I mean, they'll come do whatever you ask of them, but having a regular cadre of volunteers is really important for an arts organization.
That's great. That's really great. And so our final question that we always ask, if you've got a new person coming to Serenbe, what should visitors do that's sort of different that they may not gather from the typical ways that they might hear Serenbe? Do you have a favorite thing that you recommend to visitors that they do while they're here?
Well, it's hard to narrow that down to just one thing. But for me, when people come to visit, I love to take them to the waterfall or walk along Cedar Creek. That is such a special experience. We have the grandmother tree at the waterfall, and we have the grandfather tree out behind the art farm. Just having those experiences in nature. I love the labyrinth. So taking someone for a quiet walk in the labyrinth is really special. The tree house, which is right across the street from me in the woods. So I would say a woods experience, but you can't have a bad one. There are just so many good ones.
And especially coming to see the arts in the woods, I should end it with for you.
Well, needless to say, if you're here, hopefully you've looked at the website and there's something you're going to do in the woods at night. You're going to watch a ballet performance under the stars. And then that's another thing. We have a wonderful star canopy here at night. To just go walk over by Grange Lake on the dam and sit and look up and look at the stars. I mean, yeah, you don't have to go far to have a special moment. Watch a ballet and look up at the stars. There's lots of opportunities to have a special moment that touches you at Serenbe.
I love it.
Janice, I so appreciate your talent, your dedication. And I remember in those first years, one of the first things when Thomas Swanston said we need an artist in residence program, you stepped up, you contributed money, you contributed your energy, and you contributed your guest room to make that happen. So you have been a foundation of the entire arts movement at Serenbe from the very beginning. And sincere thank you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is funny when you think about what's been built here, what we've built here, because we built a theater when we had no theater. We built a residency program when we had no residents. There wasn't a physical place. It was just your neighbors and the people who lived here who made it all happen. So, yeah, that was your vision, Steve. So thank you for that.
All together, we make things happen.
Well, thank you both for being with us today. We'll see you on the trails.
That sounds good. Art of performance.